In this film, the oral presence is co-equal with the image. Philip Glass has a much deeper relationship. He's involved with the concept, he's involved with the coming on to the cinematography, seeing what we're doing, seeing it as it comes back in rushes, viewing it in the studio, talking to me ad nauseum, me writing him all kinds of madness about what I think the shape of it should be. He has to deal with me and my struggling through words to tell him what I'm feeling, so he's already a patient man and gets high marks for that. And then it's not like we do the edit and then he responds with the music, or that he does the music and then we respond with it. It's like a hand-in-glove operation. It's one medium motivating the other.
I would say that with Godfrey, the kind of autodidactic development, the way he taught himself as he went along, it was very conscious. It was intuitive, just as strong and just as inevitable in a certain way. But he said, well, the language of images of Koyaanisqatsi and the language of his Powaqqatsi is different, and therefore the language of the music should be different.
Using a high-tech base to do this is the only way to do it. I mean, it has to go into a theater, whether it's analog or digital. It's all very high technology. So I don't feel it's contradictory or hypocritical to use the very medium that you're questioning. In fact, I think it's appropriate, because we have to, I'm not exempting myself from this criticism. I mean, this is something involved with all of us that we're only beginning to see. So I use this medium because it is the medium that can reveal the subject most clearly. In a way, if you want to use a metaphor, it's like using fire on fire. It's like walking a razor's edge. It's this and that, rather than joining the purity league of it must be this way, and if it's not, you're bad or you're the devil. This Manichaean stuff about enemies all over the world and we're the good. Just life is not that way. Life is more complex. It's a mixture of all of this and that. The utopia of the technological order is virtual immortality, hitherto only ascribed to the gods, to the divinity. Now we have a new pantheon. The computer sits in the middle of it. The computer, not being a sign, is the most powerful instrument in the world, in that it produces what it signifies. It produces this globalization. In that sense, it is the highest magic in the world, and something that we're all in adoration of. And that's what these films are about. What this is an attempt, like at the hour of death, to rise above yourself and to see yourself in another context. And this context is this technological order. Powaqqatsi, again, in its compound meaning a way of life, Powaqqa is a black magician, an entity that eats the life of another person, that consumes the life of another in order to advance her own or his own life. That's Powaqqa operates through seduction, through allurement, not through the obviousness, I'm coming to get your heart or something like that. In other words, not like a horror show. And that Powaqqa, when it's joined with the word Qatsi, means a way of life that consumes another way in order to advance itself. So the film Powaqqatsi is about the southern hemisphere, Koyaanisqatsi, the northern hemisphere, hyperkinetic industrial technological grid. Powaqqatsi, southern hemisphere, cultures of orality, people who have a handmade living of tradition. So it is the point of view of the film, meaning in terms of its making, what you get out of it is your point of view, that our world in some way, the southern world, is being consumed by the norms of progress and development. That when we talk about people having, well, gee, in Africa their standard of living is not as good as ours. Well, who's to say that? Who's to say that a standard of living is predicated on having a house, going to school, having medical care, and this kind of food? Now, I'm not making a virtue of poverty, which I was accused of for this film, of romanticizing poverty and oppression and suffering. No, I was trying to say that there are other norms of standards that are different from ours. Again, part of this homogenization is taking the same standard for everyone. So this way of life, which to me is the future of the South, is the very thing that's at risk the most today. It is the most fragile because it is the most human, and it's the most human because it is still human beings and smaller groupings through their own cultures coming up with the differentiation and the beauty of life. It's that's at risk in Powaqqatsi.
In the case of Powaqqatsi, the big difference for me was my involvement with world music, but that was coincident with Godfrey's foraging around the Southern Hemisphere looking for images, and I went with him. I think I should point out that the collaboration is much more profound than what happens simply in the studio or in my composing studio. When Godfrey makes a movie, I usually go with him. We couldn't with Anima Mundi, of course, but with Powaqqatsi, I visited all the places he was. Sometimes with him, very often with him, and sometimes when he wasn't there. So that he was getting interested in the Southern Hemisphere as a greater kind of universe of discourse for this film. At the same time, I had always been interested in world music. I've talked about my association with Ravi Shankar often enough, so people know about that. That began in '65, and I was anxious to go back and to learn more about other cultures. And through Godfrey invited me to go to Africa, and I found a griot named Fode Suso, who agreed to take me with him to the Gambia and to Senegal and to in Mali. I went to those three countries with him. And I went to South America with another musician. I was following along with Godfrey on his travels, sometimes with him, but at least in a parallel time. And the language of the music became consonant with the language of the film in that way. But in the same way that he was striking out, he expected me to do so too, and I was delighted to.
It's not about going to the teepee or being romantically involved with the past so that we can return to this utopian, idyllic, Rousseauian idea of the past. It's that's gone and it's not there. That's not real. We have to deal with the present. So the present puts us in this conundrum of no exit out from this new universe that we've been put into called the technological order that really we know nothing about. Nothing. We do not know the effects of the cathode ray tube on human maturation, for example, and yet all of us have grown up in the light of that cathode ray tube, which is like a gun aimed right at your body, and we all know that growth occurs through light. We're cyborged. We're already cooking in the stew.
Godfrey gives me a completely clean slate. He invites me to extend myself any way that I can. He's one of the best collaborators I've ever had. Bob Wilson is like that. Allen Ginsberg was like that. He has complete confidence and trust in what I do. That's the best collaborator, because when you have that, you do your best work. I've tried to do that with other people that I've worked with too. I've learned from that, and when I work with someone, if I work with a dancer, I try to do the same thing. The opening of the film was an interesting experiment in of itself. As we know, most films are made with the film, and then the music is tacked on at the end. And I wondered whether we could reverse the process. So what I did is I looked at images from the Serra Peleda mines, which is the beginning of Powaqqatsi. I saw a documentary that Cousteau had made about Serra Peleda. The Serra Peleda mines is an open pit gold mine in northern Brazil. There are about 15,000 guys carrying dirt up the sides of a hill. That's what you see. On the basis of that, I wrote a 10-minute piece, which we recorded, and became eventually the piece that became the opening of the film. We recorded it, and we went down I went down with Godfrey to the mines, and I gave the music to the cinematographer, who then put on a Walkman, listened to the music, and shot the film. Is that something? Not only that, but the guys that are working in the mines, we had to have a permit to be there. The army is surrounding the place. Anyway, you can't get in there without the permit. And they said, "What are you guys doing?" They said, "What are you listening to?" And I said, "This music is from here." I said, "Esta música por aquí. This music is from here." And they said, "Oh," they said, "Let me hear it." So these, I mean, there were thousands of guys there, and maybe a couple dozen guys happened to be around close enough, and they said, "Let me hear it," and I played it for the guys. And some of the guys that listened to it were actually in the movie, but I don't know who they were. But Godfrey and I were there at the time. We went down to the bottom of the pit. It was scary. I mean, Godfrey, as soon as the minute we got there, Godfrey began walking down. It's about half a kilometer down into the ground. Open pit, but it's down. And I saw Godfrey walking. He's a big guy. I said, "Godfrey, where are you going?" He said, I'm going down to the bottom of the pit." So I ran after him.
We were there with, I think at that time, something like 40,000 people in the pit. I was with the cinematographer, Leo Zardumas. We were watching, we had the camera pointed on a group of men that was snaking up from the bottom. I would say, if I had to put it in skyscraper terms, coming up to about the 60th floor on a building from the base, way down. And all of a sudden, we saw a man hit it on the head with a rock. And my cinematographer said, "Well, gee, what do we do? Do we help him?" And I said, "Gee, you don't dare move, because we'll cause more problems running out to help him. These people know what to do." They immediately picked this guy up, put him over their shoulders, two of them, almost like the Pietà, and I mean, from my reference, and carried him up dutifully. They were halfway into the pit, carried him up to the top of the pit, and I was imploring my cinematographer, "You just stay right on your job and you film that event," and he caught it. For 99% of the images that you'll see in these films, they are catch as catch can, or engaging the subject, taking your chances, not setting it up, being there, waiting for it. You come with a point of view, etc. In the case of the shot of the young boy in Luxor, because the truck had already gone by and the equipment wasn't set up, we asked the young boy, would it be okay to shoot him as the next truck came by, and he said just fine. So he waited, and then he continued his journey to his home. But in all cases, in most all cases, these are engaging the subject. It's not telling the subject what to do, where to be, setting it up so that it looks like a certain thing. This is all, it's done in the spirit of documentary engagement of the subject.
I said, "Well, Godfrey, I'm doing an opera trilogy." Well, and as soon as I said trilogy, he got it right. I mean, he didn't need any hints. Well, so we talked about that from very, very early on. What's nice about trilogy is that it expands the scope of your operations. It allowed Godfrey and I to let our ideas grow together over a period of 20-odd years, and to think of it, we have a kind of integrity of theme or of conception through the 20 years. Integrity with change, you know, with evolution and modification.
3 happens to be my quintessential deep number, let's call it. So that resonated beautifully. All the scripts I do are in 3. Every 3 is the matrix of my deliberation to get somewhere, to create something. And sounded great. And it was at that moment, with the momentum of starting to realize what this other film was feeling like, that we decided together to do a trilogy. The other 2 are films where you shoot the image, you go on location, and then you edit it with a minimum of effect. And it's all about perfecting the moving image that you acquire, that you take. This film, Powaqqatsi, the location itself is an image. So we relocate onto the virtual, we relocate onto the iconic, in this case, those images that describe the world in which we live, and then we revivify them, reanimate them, change their motion, color, speed, layer them, paint them. So what we're going to end up with is a tableau of painted images that are iconic in nature. What we will be doing is recontextualizing those iconic images, and in that sense we'll be questioning the venerated familiar in this film, Powaqqatsi. Nakoi means war, to kill another, to take the life of another, When you put it together, it means a life way of war, a life way of killing. That's its etymology. My commentary to that, as I've done with the other films, is that the war that this word describes in the film is a war beyond the battlefield, a total war, war as ordinary daily living. Again, something that's hard to see when you're inside of it. War as a sanctioned aggression or sanctioned terror against the force of life itself. I would summarize the whole meaning of the word to be encapsulated in the shibboleth civilized violence, animal submission. This is what Powaqqatsi is about. And its subject is the global world. So Powaqqatsi, the world of the North. Powaqqatsi, the world of the South. Powaqqatsi, the globalized moment in which we find ourselves.
With Powaqqatsi, in fact, we got to a place where there were tissues or connecting pieces. And Godfrey hadn't even cut the images yet. And he said, well, write the music and I'll cut the images. And I said, well, what are they going to be? You know, he said, well, he showed me some things he liked, but they weren't cut at all. But we talked through it, and I knew basically I knew how they were supposed to function. And the tissues were supposed to function as connecting places between the bigger parts of the film, and they were also to be a slight reprise from the intensity of the film. So I wrote the music that way, and then Godfrey made the images to it. So we do it that way. As time goes on, we become very comfortable about switching places between being the lead and the follower. It doesn't really matter who starts because we'll change places along the way.
The next logical step is the release of this coming up film, and then the release of the Qatsi trilogy as a body of work. But what it means for me personally after the trilogy, I don't really know. I've never, remarkably, I guess because of my being a brother, a Christian brother years ago, I was always taught not to think of the future, live in the present and let God take care of the future. Well, who's ever taking care of it, somehow I ended up with the good or bad habit of not thinking about the future. Some of my friends think it's pretty stupid, actually, but I feel much more free that way. And yes, I have a number of ideas for other projects, and I hope in the next few months to be embarked on them.
The difficulty with these films is that they have never been perceived as commercial films. They've always had to been, the money's been always, not always, but until recently has been raised outside of the industry. So there'll be people lining up to see the movies. People are not lining up to produce them. It's taken 24 years to do the trilogy. At that rate, we could barely do 3 more if we got started on it. But that could change. Anyway, I happen to know that Godfrey has ideas he's thinking about.
I can't pretend to change someone's view. Let me be even clearer. Let's say, hypothetically, if you knew what the answer was, the answer for the world, because some people feel they do, you know that, they want to have a universal answer. By the very fact that it is itself universal, it is itself fascistic for me. How boring the world would be if it had one flower, and one terrain, and one language, and one way of doing things. It would deny the very existence of what this world is, which is a mysterious unity held together through the web of diversity. In effect, the shibboleth of this world, if I could be so bold, is divided we stand.
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد